22 regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council, which will be followed by a work session today. I'm glad to say there are attendees here in the hall. All the council members are here. I would make note, however, that Village Manager Jeff Sanborn is ill this afternoon and will not be with us for this meeting, but his role will be played by Jeff Batten, our longtime Assistant Village Manager. If you are not in the hall with us today, but are watching on the live stream, and you wish to communicate information to the council or comment on anything that the council is considering today or at any time, you can do that directly by email to publiccomments@vopnc.org. That's public comments, 2 C's, at vopnc.org. Those emails will be delivered to the village clerk. Village clerk will distribute those to the village council members and other staff as appropriate. Those comments will not be made in public today, however, at the meeting. If you are here and wish to speak at the end of the regular meeting under public comments, I would ask you please to sign the form at the back of the room where the table is there if you wish to speak, and I'll call on speakers in order of the way you have signed up. So the village clerk will take that form in a few minutes and bring it to my desk. We won't get to those comments till the end of the regular meeting, but I would appreciate it if you would sign that form. With that said, we'll move to reports, and I'll call on Mr. Batten for any comments from the village staff, please.
Yes, Mayor. The only thing I think that we'd like to report out, I think.
Jeff, is your microphone all set there? Excuse me.
I got it on.
Thank you.
Speak a little closer into it. Yeah, the only thing I would want to report on is the renovation that we've had ongoing in the upstairs portion of Village Hall, primarily kind of upstairs and behind this room, is substantially complete. Administration has moved into that new space. And then phase 2 of the renovations upstairs there will begin next week. And ultimately, Human Resources will be moving into the space that was vacated by the administration, making room for planning and inspection staff to expand a little bit in the downstairs area.
Thank you very much. It's a good renovation and is helping to keep the village well managed in spaces and move around where appropriate. If we're having any trouble with microphones this afternoon, just raise your hand and let us know if you're not hearing correctly. Moving to reports from the Village Council, from my perspective, I have 2 things. First of all, the U.S. Kids Golf was here over the last couple of weeks, as you're well aware. Very successful activity by them again this year. They appreciate really the whole resource package of Southern Moore County, as you well know, but it's a wonderful thing to have here, and we appreciate their presence in Pinehurst. Secondly, Council Member Pizzella and I this morning were at the monthly meeting of Partners in Progress. A couple of things to report from that meeting. Partners in Progress will be changing its name in the coming months to become what I believe will be Moore County Development Authority. They're wanting to make sure that as they work across the state and outside the state, that it's clear they are the economic development arm of Moore County. Sometimes the Moore County name has been dropped in recent years in conversations. So they will officially change that name later this year or early next year to Moore County Development Authority, I believe it is. Secondly, they have reported that the number of business leads that just the Moore County board are working on is up to, well, at the end of fiscal 22, which was end of June, there were 71 leads during the year that they worked on, up from 41 the year before. And the pace of inquiries to the Moore County Development Authority is very strong again this year. They're working on 4 or 5 leads even at this time with respect to new business opportunities in Moore County. A point that was made, and I emphasize it because it's something we really need to be aware of here, the sort of central core of North Carolina, as it's called, which is roughly the Greensboro to Raleigh segment and the counties north and south of that line and the interstate, is seeing increasing activity levels, as I've already mentioned, for Moore County. And a lot of that's being driven by the developments in the Greensboro area with respect to electronic vehicles and batteries. As you may know, there's two facilities, one under Toyota and one under a second company that are intending, I think they've committed, and there's incentives from the state to open battery-related product manufacturing companies. And so the spill-off from that for suppliers to them, and let alone residents and job activities, is affecting Moore County. We're seeing some of that inquiry, according to Natalie Hawkins, who was the executive director. So a lot of activity level, and another reason perhaps to change their name to emphasize the Moore County part of that. And due to the two other things about Partners in Progress that I mentioned, they will be adding one staff member effective next year to help manage the business development and inquiries that they're receiving. That person to be hired will start early next year, is the plan, and the county will be funding pretty much all of that compensation package, at least for the first year. I would anticipate that Pinehurst and some of the other towns may be called upon to support that too, but at least for the first year, the county is entertaining the idea of supporting that person. Those are the key points I'd like to make on my reports. Lydia, we'll start over here with you.
Thank you. CVB has gotten estimated numbers on the economic impact of the Women's Open. And I'll have to read this because economic impact is something I don't fully understand. They're estimated the economic impact for Moore County of close to $19 million. This takes into account numerous factors such as hotel occupancy during that period, short-term rental occupancy, estimated visitor spending based on historic data and calibrated for the event with 70,000 people attending for the week, according to the USGA, and also the impact of day trippers. And John, thanks for the segue into U.S. Kids Golf. On the front page of the pilot, there was a picture of the kids who had gathered for the parade, and Pat and I went to the parade, and it was spectacular. And I didn't even realize that there was a festival on Village Green. So I went down to the festival, and that was so much fun to watch these kids from all these nations having a great time on the Village Green. And you know, one thing that's occurred to me, this is more than 2,000 competitors, and this year they competed at a record 18 golf courses in southern Moore County. And it seems like they've got a presence in Pinehurst that I really don't understand. Not only do they have the World Championships every year, but they've got camps, and I'm wondering if it makes sense at some point for us to consider either having Don Van Horn or somebody from the foundation to come and just give us a presentation about what they do and have that in, you know, so we can better understand. We understand USGA, we understand USGA events, we understand North-South, but I'm not sure we really understand the footprint of U.S. Kids Golf. So I hope we can consider that. And then last, some secret Santa left something in my box, and it was some person's analysis of the quality of life survey. So there's nothing in here to indicate who did it, but it was a very thorough analysis, but thank you. But it means a lot that some resident is paying attention to what we're doing and spending some time doing an analysis and then coming down here to give it to me. So if you're here somewhere, thank you. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Lydia. Mr. Pizzella.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, Lydia, was surprised to find out about that event afterward, and it was a great event and a terrific parade. A couple of items in the announcement area. First of all, for those of you who might have missed it, Pinehurst is going to soon be the headquarters of the C.F. Smith Property Company. They have purchased the 100-year-old Magnolia Place building in downtown Pinehurst, and they're going to move their headquarters into that building over the next several months. So that's a nice coup for the village of Pinehurst, and we welcome. They've obviously been around a long time in this area, and proud to have them as business partners here in the village. Secondly, I wanted to pass on that the Live at After 5 event that's going to be coming up later this week, that the Village Chapel will be opening their new Heritage Hall to Parents' Night Out at that time, and they'll have games and snacks and all, and so people are welcome to attend. It's open to all. Lastly, In the last 2 weeks, I had the opportunity to attend the Historic Preservation Committee meeting. That was on July 28th. And I wanted to mention that what a good job they do. They carefully review the proposals, and they ask a lot of good questions of the applicants who come in and want to do something to their home. And they ask serious questions. And I think we're fortunate to have the quality of volunteers on this committee in particular, who really put in the time and effort to watch out for the village of Pinehurst and the quality of life here. And it's also reminds me the good sign it is of the use of a lot of the talent we have in the village who have expertise in these areas that are signing up for our advisory committees. And I always make the announcement to encourage other citizens to look for an opportunity to serve the village. I also attended the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, and they also asked some good questions. And one of the things that was mentioned there, which had a bit of an impact on my thinking, had to do with the Village Place small area plan that we've looked at and approved and passed on, and they're now in the next phase, the planning and zoning folks. But a couple of members brought up something that I thought was rather interesting, and that has to do with the idea of any retail space on Rattlesnake Trail. And what struck me, and I hadn't thought about it before, is that retail space there is not walkable to the downtown village core, whereas retail space being developed in where our public services complex are now, near the Pinehurst Brewery, is very conducive to walking to the village downtown or to the Carolina Hotel. And that retail space on Rattlesnake itself may attract people who drive in on 211, do whatever shopping there is, and then drive back out on 211 rather than sort of visit our village. So that as we look down the road as to the type of development that might take place there, we should think in terms of projects that are not explicitly retail. I hadn't sort of given that my full thought in the past, but I will in the future. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pat, on that latter point, is it concerned that there's not walkability from Village Place, Rattlesnake, or not? Because we have been doing sidewalks over there through McIntyre.
I think the concern that I came away with is that it's really walkable, I want to point in the right way, over there by the Pinehurst Brewery to go right into our village and continue to shop and eat and so forth. But if you're up at the end of Rattlesnake Trail, that's a pretty good hike down to the village. And so I hadn't thought about it in those terms before, but it's a longer walk. Maybe I'm just getting older and it seems longer to me, but I just think that's a long walk. If you picture yourself across the street from the 7-Eleven there, the stop, and shopping, and then, well, let me go to the village. Well, maybe not. I'm going to drive back down there, as opposed to if you were down here, where we have some obviously potential development. It's not at all difficult to walk, like many people do, from the brewery to the village. Thank you.
Jane?
I have no reports.
Jeff Morgan?
No reports, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll move on into agenda item number 3, motion to approve the consent agenda items. Does any council member have a question or want to pull out any of the consent agenda items for further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve all items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
That's a
I do have a question.
Uh-oh.
I took the dissent. When you said the consent agenda, I was thinking only in terms of the minutes from the last meeting and so forth. I did have some questions on the police and safety reports.
I'll withdraw my motion.
all right, we can take those questions now if you have them.
Yes, I do.
Or do you want to postpone this to a different time?
I'm very comfortable in either situation. These might be some questions that, I don't know, if Jeff Batten's
I'll tell you what, if, these are specific to the police department, is that correct?
Yes, almost all our police department
I would think it would be helpful then, in addition to Jeff Sanborn or Jeff Batten today, that we have the chief here or someone from the department.
That'd be
It
helpful.
would be all right, and the council would agree, we could pull out the police report for our next meeting and consider it then with the questions being asked in the meantime. And then if you have anything further, Patrick, we could deal with it at that time. Would that be all right?
I would appreciate that, yes.
So, Mr. Morgan?
Possibly, we could also have them go an email to the chief so we can address them
Yes.
and deal that way.
Yeah, I'll do
And then
that.
just a
I
matter of-
think that's what the instructions were, and I'll copy all the council members.
Okay.
Fine. So we'll pull out the 2022 police report, the biennial police report from this consideration. And then the motion is?
We're just pulling out the police report?
Yes, I believe so. Is that correct?
That's all I'm asking.
Just the police report, yes.
Now, I'm going to move to approve all items listed and considered routine in the consent agenda, except the police report.
That's a motion by Jane Hogaman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lydia Bosch. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion is carried unanimously. I'll move on into item number 4. This is a discussion and consideration of a budget amendment reappropriating funds from the FY22 to FY23 budget. Brooke, you're all in place. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is a routine item that we bring to you each year to roll forward funds, in this case, from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23 for a few categories of items. One of those being projects that were started but not completed as of June 30th, projects that were not started at all due to various timing delays, and also unspent donated funds that have various restrictions, whether that's by donors or through state and federal government units. Some of those funds have to be used for a particular purpose, so we roll forward those funds into the next year so that they can be used in that manner. All of the appropriations for these items lapse and add to fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So this amendment essentially goes into fund balance and pulls the appropriations back out of fund balance and reappropriates them in the year so that they can be used as they were originally intended. This year is a little bit unique, though, because we do have an additional element of the American Rescue Plan Act Special Revenue Fund. So normally, in a normal year, all of the funds will go into fund balance, and we do this roll forward amendment or reappropriation amendment and pull all of those funds back out of fund balance. This year, however, there's $1,011,000 that's remaining in the American Rescue Plan Act Special Revenue Fund budget that we would like to go ahead and transfer over. We were not able to do the full transfer when we were developing the fiscal year 23 budget because state requires us to adopt a balanced budget, so revenues have to equal expenditures. And we didn't have sufficient expenditures to recognize the full transfer over. But now we have an opportunity to do that and recognize the remaining funds. That way we will recognize the full grant within one fiscal year. So part of these funds will be pulled from that transfer, and then the remainder of those funds will be pulled out of fund balance. And that piece is about $426,000 that'll be pulled out of fund balance. We have a list for you to review and for your consideration. The total amount of reappropriations this year is $1,437,173. This is a little higher than normal, but there were a few large projects and purchases this year that I'll mention in a moment. Our departments worked really hard to complete as many projects as possible, but we did experience several manufacturing delays this year, actually, and some supply chain issues that contributed to some of these items that you'll see on the list. So I'll just go through it and briefly cover just a few of the larger items. The first of those is the Village Hall office expansion and furnishings that Jeff mentioned in his report. Most of the construction was complete for the Village Hall office expansion on the second floor by June 30th, but there is one small phase remaining. Also, the office furniture for that space was ordered in fiscal year 22, but we just didn't receive it until July, and so we'll need to roll forward the funds to pay for that furniture. Another significant project is the fire station storage building Design was complete for the project, but construction is scheduled to begin in September with anticipation of a completion date by the end of the calendar year, so somewhere in November, December timeframe.
Remind me where that fire station storage building is going to be?
That's going to be right behind Station 91,
91, okay.
right beside us. Also, the fire department has requested to carry over funds for turnout gear. They ordered that in February, and this is one of those examples of supply chain issues. They ordered it, and it just did not come in, did not arrive by June 30th. Another similar issue, we placed vehicle orders early in fiscal year 22. One of them we actually placed in July of last year, and we have not received 3 of the vehicles that we ordered. And those were the inspections truck, a streets and grounds truck, and a solid waste garbage truck. However, we did just receive notification from the dealership that the streets and grounds truck is at the dealership, so we should be receiving that within the next couple weeks. In Public Services Administration, funding to complete the Stormwater Master Plan is requested to be moved forward. The process is currently underway. We're expecting completion of Phase 1 by the first quarter of this fiscal year. Streets and Grounds, we would request to move forward, roll forward funds to complete the design and construction of the Pine Vista and McKenzie Road sidewalks. The design is currently underway for those walkways, with construction expected to go out to bid near the end of the first quarter. The Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Master Plan, funding for that is requested to be carried over, and that contract will be discussed at your work session tonight as well, to get additional information on that. In the harness track, a few land improvement projects, $91,000 worth was requested to be moved forward. Staff performed a review of the facility itself and identified several specific projects to address stormwater, paddock fencing, and structural related issues, and those projects are currently being prioritized and evaluated. And so funding for those requested to be moved forward. And the last item is in the Planning Department, funding for the update to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, the PDO. And that's currently in the request for qualifications development stage of the process. So excluding the top 4 largest projects, that would be the fire station storage building, the vehicles, sidewalk construction, and that PDO update, our roll forward would be around $432,000, and that's very comparable with the normal, if you will, roll forward in previous years, within the past 10 years or so. So tonight, there is an ordinance available for your review and consideration, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or I may call on a couple of department heads in the audience if it's something I can't answer.
Brooke, thanks for that. This is a great example of what the rest of the American economy is going through with supply chain issues. We're seeing it and have seen it right here. We've been aware of that for some months, and here it is. Remind me of one thing. The fund balance to be used is about $425,000 or so, right?
That's correct.
Now that will be an increase in the use of fund balance from where we left off with the approval of the budget at the end of June, before the end of June, correct? So we're going to be using another $400,000 in fund balance, budgeted. We don't know how we'll end up the year in actual,
Right.
but that's the increase.
Yes, we are using $436,000. Now, I want to keep in mind, all this $1.4 million worth of projects was budgeted in fiscal year 22.
Right.
They were not spent.
Right.
So all of those funds, $1.4 million, was added to fund balance. So we are going back in now in fiscal year 23 and moving $426,000 or so back out of fund balance and putting it into fiscal year 23 and
That's
using
my
it in
question.
23. So yes, we are increasing fund balance use in fiscal year 23. However, we added it the previous year. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So these aren't additional projects. I want to make sure to make
Right.
that clear. These aren't additional projects. It's just a timing issue between fiscal
Yes.
years. Yes.
Understood. Okay. Other questions for council for Brooke?
Yeah.
Lydia?
Thank you. Okay, so it's my understanding that we're looking at things that were budgeted for fiscal year 2022, but because of timing, we can't spend the money until '23.
Right.
But I look at the quality of life survey, which was not budgeted. I mean, because that just came onto the radar like 2 months ago.
Yes, we had funds available, so there was a budget amendment. You know, the manager has authority to approve budget amendments
Okay.
within a certain amount, within his threshold.
Okay.
And there were funds available in the administration to budget or governing body, whichever it
Okay.
is, for that project.
Okay.
And so that project initiated in fiscal year '22. That's right.
Okay, so there could be other things on here that were not specifically in the budget by line item, but based on the manager's discretion or whatever, they were expenditures that were to occur before the end of the fiscal year, but didn't. So now, because of timing differences, they're going to be brought forward into this fiscal year.
Right, because funds were available in the previous year. That's
Okay.
exactly right, for these projects.
And then another thing, okay, how much money did we get in American Rescue Act money?
Right around 5.2, 5.26, something like that. I can get you the exact number.
And we've gotten how much, I mean, we're getting it in a couple of payments?
Yep, we received 2 payments, and we just received the second half of that last week, actually. So we do have both of those. It was 5.2 million, 5.29,
Okay.
and we received it in 2 installments.
Okay. And then we went through the logistics of charging payroll to it because if we're given an amount under like 10 million, then you can just spend it any way you want without having to account to the government. So we decided to spend it on salaries, and the rest we would use on other things. And I guess we never really talked about what the other things are. And I look at this and I go, I want to make sure we're doing a good job of spending this free money we got from the government and not spending it on cost overruns, or I want us to be good stewards with the money we got from the federal government. And something you just said, it was easy for me to conclude that we're using some of that money for routine expenditures rather than, I don't know, capital improvements, infrastructure. I don't know.
So you are correct. We, at the advice of the School of Government and the LGC, and we've sought advice from them in all the various office hours and trainings and things that they've recommended. The recommendation for those that are under $10 million, we have this option to utilize it for an item such as salaries and benefits, which then frees up general fund dollars of $5.2 million to be used without those federal purchasing restrictions, because the federal uniform guidance purchasing requirements have a lot of strings attached to it. So you are right. By doing it this way, then we free up those dollars that we can utilize based on our just normal state purchasing policy that we have to abide by in our local policy. And how we have done that is we've incorporated the full $5.2 million within our 5-year strategic operating plan as a funding source. And so by doing that, we were able to incorporate several significant capital projects without issuing debt. And so that was one piece. If you look back at the previous strategic operating plan, there was, potential debt that we would have to issue to build some of these construction projects, but that requirement was removed in this most recent strategic operating plan because of this one-time funding source that we were able to utilize instead.
Okay.
So we have the library expansion is one key item that we thought we would have to finance a portion of that.
Okay.
Before this funding, and then the parking structure, or a carriage house parking facility, which is currently in the 5-year plan.
Okay, and I may need to go back to that just to refresh my memory about what we did. But again, we've got this money, and I just want to make sure that we use it in the best interest of the Village of Pinehurst.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Brooke, is it fair to say that we are not using any of the freed up $5.2 million on any projects in FY '22? Are they all earmarked in future years?
It's not specifically earmarked for those specific items. We did have some larger capital items, for example, potential synthetic turf, which was a large one-off project. But the 2 capital projects that we had planned, again, the library expansion and the carriage house capital project fund, would make up $5.2 million worth. And so it's not specifically tied to, one of those projects, but because of that funding, we're able to do all of those items without issuing any kind of debt.
My understanding is the impact of the receipt of the 5.4 million is that we're going to be much better off in our capital project plans going forward because we have $5.4 million to spend. And I think we have to start spending some of it by 24 or 25.
So we'll
and
be,
with the 5-year horizon in total, though.
we'll be able to accomplish that in fiscal year '23
Right.
through the salaries and benefits component by us, utilizing it for that purpose, which is a legitimate way. And then we'll have those freed up dollars to use immediately at, per your
It'll
discretion.
be capital projects.
Right,
I think that's
exactly.
what the council wants to do, and that's,
Exactly.
you're just confirming that. That's what we discussed some months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So any thought out there that these are going to routine expenditures is not correct. These are going to be capital projects
Right.
over time as required and as we're allowed to do under state law,
Correct,
and federal law.
correct. Thank you.
Other questions for Brooke on this amendment?
Yeah, I think regarding the carriage house development, the parking, I think the council was pretty clear that that was not something that we saw on the horizon in the short term. That's my recollection.
Not in the short term.
That's
no.
for sure.
And maybe not at all, but it's.
Not at all, but,
If we were to go forward with it, that's an
Yeah, 'cause that was
example of
a-
how the funds could be spent.
That was a big chunk of money that I think, my recollection is that there was a lot of consensus about that, to not go forward with that 3.5. A few questions. One has to do with we have, is it $5,000 left to pay for the small area plans? Do we still owe them money?
We don't owe them money currently, no, but this is what was remaining that's available for incidentals or, things like that. So we're moving forward the funds in case it is needed.
As I went through the list, I counted up $344,500 under the category of professional services. Where is that going, or where was it going, and where is it coming from? If you go down that list in the ordinance itself, professional services is cited in 4 instances: 205,000, 10,000, 84,000, and 45,000.
One of them is library design services, architectural services for the library expansion is one of those. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan would be another one.
Emergency Operations Plan, $10,000. Stormwater Master Plan, $84,000. Parks and Rec Master Plan, $45,000. Small Area Plans, $5,200. Pinehurst Development Ordinance of $200,000.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the professional services at lines.
Right, and that's what I was adding up.
You're adding them, okay, I see. Is that money then that we had left over, that we were planning to spend in those areas?
That was budgeted for those contracts, and they did not.
Did the contracts come in at less, or did we end up not awarding the contracts? Those are, pretty healthy sums of money. That's why I get the small ones. I'm not getting the big one.
Sure. A couple of the large ones, the PDO, for example, has not gone out to bid yet. That's still being developed. The Parks and Rec Master Plan, that's being discussed tonight. A contractor had not officially been awarded at that time. And then a couple of these, the Stormwater Master Plan, that was awarded and Phase 1 was underway, but it hadn't been completed yet. And there's still a Phase 2 that would be rolled
If
forward
you
as well.
go to account 10-40-710-5800, and it says 205,000,
That's the planning department.
that's the planning department. And where was that intended for? That's what I'm trying to read the accounts.
That's the PDO of $200,000 plus $5,200 for the small area plan added together in this ordinance. We try to add accounts when they're the exact same, so they don't have so many additional budget lines.
And so what we're saying is in those 2 items, we're going to no longer need to use them there. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's where they were to begin with. They were already in this exact general ledger account in fiscal year '22, but we didn't expend those funds in fiscal year '22. So we need to move them from fiscal year '22 over to fiscal year '23 for that exact same general ledger account so that we can pay for it
Okay.
after
So-
July 1st.
the funds are being moved into the new fiscal year.
Right, same GL
But we're
account.
still, we're going to be expending that amount of money in the new fiscal year on those projects.
Right. That's right.
Understand? Thank you.
Perfect, sure.
Thank you. Other questions from council members? For Brooke? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
I move to approve ordinance 22-10, amending the ordinance regarding revenues and expenditures of the general fund by reappropriating funds for operations of the Village of Pinehurst from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2023.
That's a motion by Councilmember Bosch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hogeman. All in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll move on into item number 5 on our agenda tonight. Jeff, would you like to introduce that, or just call on Matt McCarahan?
Matt McCarahan is going to step forward and take us through the year-ending FY22 strategic operating plan update.
Thank you. Matt, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to see you all. So, Jeff, thank you for the introduction. This is going to be just a brief update on where we're at for Q4 of the strategic operating plan for FY22. So, as you all have discussed already, we've talked a little bit about the transition from FY22 to 23. We're currently in FY23, and in fact, even tonight, we're going to have a couple of conversations, I think, that come before you about initiative action plan items in front of 23. But before we go to there, we like to take a step back and look at where we ended FY22, especially when it looks at the initiative action plan items that were designed within that strategic operating plan, as well as specifically the opportunities for improvement and innovation that align to our strategic objectives within the FY22 strategic operating plan. So we're just going to walk through briefly, again, these different sections here. And on the first thing I'll orient you to on the screen is this is an update as of June 30th. So at the end of fiscal year 22, where we were at our initiative action plans, both on the progress that they were making as well as the metrics that were assigned to them. And so as of the end of the fiscal year, 1 was in progress and on schedule. 2 of them were in progress but not on schedule. And 1 of them was going to be beginning in the future. And the reason why I put that as beginning in the future is because obviously we've gone through the conversations about these initiative action plans, and some that were in fiscal year 22 have been moved to another fiscal year. So I went ahead and marked that as a future year IAP. And then 1 of them was completed. And we're going to go into more detail on the specifics of what the individual IAPs are in a second. But also, one thing that we're excited to share is that on the metrics, so each initiative action plan item has at least 1 key metric to show our progress or our success around that initiative action plan item. 4 of them achieved their projected performance, and again, 1 of them begins in the future, and that's tied to that initiative action plan item that we moved to the future. So to go into a little bit more detail, Kelly, if it's all right, if you could scroll down to the next page for me here. This is a more detailed look at the initiative action plan items that, again, were a part of FY22. Some of them started before FY22, some continue past FY22. So I'm going to go through these briefly with our Q4 comments, and if you have any questions, please let me know. So the first one, the update to the PDO. The Q4 comments were that the scope of services has been developed and that they're just waiting on other projects currently to clear their queue before finalizing and issuing that RFQ. They currently anticipate it to be in Q2 of FY23. So around December, January, I'll have an update for you on that as well. Now, this has been pushed to a future year, and so that's why the IAP metric, the IAP metric has been pushed because at the time we talked about, again, how we haven't yet gone out to the RFQ. So looking at the sections drafted and presented to Village Council obviously has to be pushed as well. So that metric has been pushed forward. Now, for the next one, the small area plan, we're going to have a conversation, I think, about that immediately after me as well for Pinehurst South. But as of Q4, so again, these are a little dated now, the Planning and Zoning Board received public comments and recommended approval for various modifications on both Village Place and Pinehurst South. And on June 4th, U Council considered the Village Place plan and approved it with the P&Z Board's recommended changes. And at the time, the number of participants who attended those meetings were far exceeded our goal. Now, you may look at that and say, why did we set the goal at 25 and we have the number at 1,300 plus? And that's because, again, the way the goal was associated with where we thought the small area plan would be at the time. We actually thought that the metric would be closer to, or the IAP would be closer to being finished earlier within the fiscal year. So as we've pushed out the small area plan, there's been a lot more opportunity for that conversation, so the numbers went up dramatically. The third one, again, is the expand downtown parking facilities, and one thing I neglected to mention, but the ones that are in red also are tied to the 22 areas of focus. So the first three there are part of the areas of focus. The third one is, again, talking about the downtown parking facility. It was pushed to a future year as well, and Pat, you mentioned that earlier as well. And the number of parking spaces downtown were 364. We had the goal of 364 for this year. But as I mentioned in the comments, it was adjusted to begin in July of 2024. Now, and you would see that reflected in the FY23 plan. Develop a comprehensive stormwater master plan. It's currently marked as in progress, but not on schedule because at the time it was supposed to be completed. But a part of it was supposed to be completed, one of the tasks, before the end of fiscal year 22. So as it states here, they're currently behind schedule, but they're working with McGill and will be planning on coming forward to you all at an upcoming work session with design concepts and fundings to be met within Q1 of 23. And so the number of MyVOP stormwater requests is that metric. Right now, we're currently at 84. The goal was to be below 150. So we are currently meeting that goal. And then,
Question?
yes.
What do we anticipate that we'll likely get, not the specifics, but what will we receive at the end of the quarter one FY23 from the consultant, and will the consultant come here and help walk us through this?
Yes, so I can only speak in general from what I've spoken to Mike Apke about it, and so I put in here, they do expect some type of design concept and some type of, and the funding options that are available for that during that Q1 meeting, with the final recommendations, as it mentions here, scheduled for the end of the calendar year, so that by the end of Q2 of FY23.
And I can elaborate a little bit on that, Pat. We will be coming to you all in September as an update. And I think the current thought is the consultants will be here. It's only the interim, we're working between phase one and phase two, trying to finish wrapping up some of the items that were listed in phase one, scope of work, and moving towards phase two. The things that you will likely see are some recommendations around our current engineering standards and specifications manual and our PDO. Help me out a little bit, Darren. There's a couple of other things. There's also a list of projects. Darren's on the same committee that I am. There'll be a list of projects that we'll talk about. We're not into a design phase or anything of those, but in phase two, we're looking at potentially, we want conceptual designs. There's about, like I said, I think maybe a dozen or so that are kind of the larger basin type of drainage projects that would affect, in most cases, like more than a couple of homes, those kinds of things.
Question, is McGill aware of the proposal from the resort regarding the stormwater area next to the spa that they want to turn into a parking lot? Sort of a retention water area?
I'm not positive that, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think they should be aware of that, because that, I don't know what's all involved technically, but
Yeah.
that was a new,
I
something
know
new.
they were going underground with it, an infiltration system as the method to manage that stormwater that currently goes into that pond.
Several months ago, there was an excellent separate meeting held in this assembly hall. I can't remember who from staff was here, that went over the stormwater issue in general, and we had to my surprise, quite a few number of citizens who were here who follow this issue, which is why I've asked, and you all are going to put something on a future meeting. There's just one of these issues where there are more people who actually follow it than you can imagine because of their experiences with the stormwater issue in this area. So I think this is
Yeah,
important.
there's, I think some sedimentation erosion control, considerations that will be talked about when they come forth. I know we've talked about a 25-year storm. They're going to have some comments about that as well when we do the preview of kind of where we are at this juncture.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And last but certainly not least on this list is to expand and enhance library services. This one's marked as complete. Now, that there is, that's because the phases that were associated with this, which were to the onboarding of library and archive services, to assume the operations of the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives, that was essentially the completion point for this initiative action plan. So moving forward, there's a new initiative action plan item around expanding and renovating both the library and the archive starting in FY23. But for that purpose, it is marked here as complete. I will just mention that the RFQ was published, and planning, design, and construction of the expansion will be developed into that new IAP. So you'll be seeing an update on that going into Q1 of FY23. On the next page, these items here are all of the FY22 through 26 strategic objectives. FY22 through 26 opportunities for innovation and improvement projects and evaluations that specifically align to the strategic objectives within the strategic operating plan. And I'll just give you a few brief notes, and I'm happy to go into more detail on any questions that you all have. So the first 5, again, are the IAPs. And then there are 15 that are opportunities for innovation and improvement. Of those that were marked for completion in FY22, 2 of them are complete, 3 of them are still in progress and moving forward. 1 of them was removed based off of action within the FY23 strategic operating plan, as well as 1 was moved to the future. Again, both of those were done because of action into the FY23 plan.
I noticed the presentation for the council on the 3 alternatives for the public services complex by September 30th. Will that be something we'll get in an open session, or is that something we're going to get in sort of a plan, document, or?
It would be in a work session.
Work session.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's the way I would envision it, and it'd probably be the last meeting in September.
Thank you.
In general, that is my presentation. I'm happy to go into detail, as I mentioned, on any of these specifics. But as of right now, those projects that are still in progress that I just mentioned are going to continue moving forward into FY23. Yes.
Back. Yeah. Right there.
You want the color slide, the bars?
No, I'm just reading these quickly to see if there was anything that. No, there it is. The stormwater management plan is still there. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions for Matt? It's pretty straightforward, Matt. Thanks very much. Looks like everything's moving, or we've made arrangements to make some changes if we need to over time, but it's coming together here. I know we're in the first quarter of FY23, so there's already some projects that we're expecting to hear from you on, and well, everybody on in about a month's time.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 6.
Yes, Darren and Alex will join you here and talk about where we are on the small area plans in Pinehurst South.
I want to welcome Darren and Alex here. This is discussion on the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan. We've all had a chance to look over the material, review information from the planning board. It looks like Darren's got an additional handout for us tonight. Darren? I think well, there are questions on any parts of the plan that council may wish to review tonight, the major emphasis, I think, right now is in Pinehurst South, commercial versus residential, non-residential development, what kind of a community we see there or not. Is the property west of Highway 5 to be different from the property east of Highway 5? Those, I think, are the key concerns that council's had over the last meeting or two. Sorry? Yeah, well, Darren's going to explain this in a minute.
Okay.
And I was just giving a little background to myself and everybody else about where we're going to, what we'd like to discuss tonight, subject to Alex and Darren's direction, and answer any questions we have about going forward. Darren, thank you very much, Darren, and thank you for this additional material.
And the additional material that I've given to you is really, when we've talked about this process and where we went with the small area plans, it all started with the connection to this document, the comprehensive plan. And so I went back, and we've had questions about how does this plan, the Pinehurst small area plan, implement the comprehensive plan? So what I did is I went back through the comprehensive plan and kind of took out and excerpted sections of the comp plan that I think directly relates to the Pinehurst South plan and the Village Place plan. So this is just a document to show what those kind of connections are, and I wanted to briefly go over them with you just to show, as I look through the plan, and I think we've done in general, with the exception of some of the land uses that have been discussed on Pinehurst South in the east of NC5, I think we've done a real good job of implementing the goals in the comprehensive plan. So, and I'm just going to go over, this will be real quick, and won't be Darren's long 25-minute presentation. First, top 10, in the comprehensive plan, we have top 10 implementation strategies. One of those implementation strategies was 6, create a thriving business environment that encourage innovation and creativity with innovation hubs, co-working spaces, artist studios in the Village Place area near Village Center and NC5 commercial area. And that was one of the goals when we laid out this plan, was to create these active mixed-use areas where you could have restaurants, or you could have retail, you could have people living. So this is one of those top 10 strategic items from our comprehensive plan, where it states both areas are ripe for redevelopment as mixed-use centers that are both in keeping with Pinehurst and could provide more diversified housing options for Pinehurst residents. So I think as you look in the Pinehurst South plan, in the Village Place plan, we have created that environment within the plan. We do have a strong mixed-use element in both plans. Pinehurst South that is really on the east side of NC5, and Village Place throughout. It's a mixed use. It's really intended to be a mixed use plan. I think strategic item number 8: create new open spaces and amenities within neighborhoods, such as neighborhood parks, dog parks, gathering spaces, and community gardens. If you look at the plan during some of the public workshops, there was concerns about us not having enough green spaces. I think we've created a connected area of green spaces, and we added that on after, and we really increased that after Public Workshop 2, when we created that 6-acre park. So we created a potential 6-acre park on the east side of NC5, and I think it really hits that goal. We've created this neighborhood park feeling that can have, and we'll get into it in a little bit, all the elements that we are actually looking for in the comprehensive plan. Implement best practices in mixed-use design, mixed-use neighborhood design. Residents expressed desire for mixed-use centers to include residential component during the Envision the Village. The village may want to consider implementing some best practices in mixed-use development. And we're actually working on that right now with the Planning and Zoning Board and the development of the form-based code. So when we're talking about the regulating plan, when we're talking about where parking should be, these implementing the best mixed-use neighborhood design doesn't really come out of the plan itself. It comes what happens after the plan. So this is what we're going to start developing with some of our code updates. And really what that is if you go down to this page, they have identified 5 principles that cities, towns, and villages should consider when designing new mixed-use centers that include walkability. I think we've done that with Pioneer South, all of them. Connectivity, we do connect to the adjacent neighborhoods or trying to make a connection. Development intensity, scale, and careful consideration of parking locations. So when you start to see those illustrations in the plan sets of what the recommended, how the recommended land use pattern is, what you see is you'll see buildings that are up closer to the street to create that walkable environment without having that sea of asphalt between the curb and the front of the building. It doesn't lend itself to a walkable mixed-use area. Better parking design, this just talks about not having parking between the front of the building, and I think that's an element that we've tried to do. Another thing that the comp plan had called for is explore ways to enhance the overall quality of new housing in the village. Within the 2 small area plan areas, you see a heavy emphasis on mixed use. Mixed use is not something that we have a lot of housing opportunities in the community. There are some opportunities in Village Center, but outside of the Village Center, you really don't have a lot of opportunities for people living above businesses. So I think both Village Place and Pioneer South both have some of those elements that are in those plans. Another one, create nodes of mixed-use development. Pioneer says opportunities beyond the Village Center to create nodes where mixed-use development can thrive in walkable districts that offer a variety of housing types, office settings, retail, entertainment, and dining options. And when you look at, what we've tried to at least propose in the village in Pioneer South, we tried to, add some variety with that housing type by recommending that single-family attached or detached in the southern part of the Blake Boulevard area. And understandably, we had a long discussion at the Planning and Zoning Board on that, and they recommended to not go with that type pattern. I'm not going it's a good recommendation. I support the recommendation. So they're supporting something other than that pattern, which could be a mixed use type pattern, office pattern down there, typical of what's on top of it, north of it, just below Blake Boulevard. Public input on retail in the village. You look on this page. Residents were asked to provide input on the types of shopping and dining destinations they would like to see more of in the village. And I keep hitting on this, but this is what we're trying to achieve. Walkable mixed-use centers ranked very high, while drive-throughs and big box were not desirable. We don't want to see that mixed-use activity centers within the village. And you can see that there was the walkable mixed-use centers. This is what we're talking about, is walkable mixed-use centers. Not at the scale, probably not at the scale, but walkable mixed-use centers. And then we get into the actual focus area 2, which is that focus area extraction within the comp plan, which is everything was kind of designed off that recommendation in the comp plan for focus area 2, which was the NC5 commercial area. And when we get to the map itself, I don't know why it's doing that, mixed use center, this was on the east side of NC5. This right now in the comp plan is a recommendation on the east side of Highway 5, and that was to create mixed-use center stacked residential. These areas are opportunities for future walkable mixed-use developments in proximity to neighborhoods, roads, and utility infrastructure. And we do, and it is. We came up with a plan that does have that. Concentrating development in these areas will help the village meet its goals of providing a wide variety of housing types and achieving more walkable and bikeable nodes of activity. This mixed-use center would allow housing to be stacked on non-residential uses. And that was the major deviation from the comp plan itself on the east side of NC5. We showed that single-family residential on the south side of Highway 5 below Blake Boulevard. The recommendation is not to carry that forward with the final plan. The plan is to create a land use pattern similar north of that park for a non-residential or mixed-use pattern.
Darren, I think you said south, but you meant east side of Highway 5.
East side of Highway 5, south of Blake Boulevard.
Right.
And this, again, the implementation strategy 2.3, create a small area plan for NC5, Highway 5, commercial area depicted in focus area 2 to facilitate as an innovation hub. Now, you can see as part of the market analysis and discussion, we don't think, when they analyzed it, we don't really have the characteristics to create one of those true R&D, maybe life science, medical hubs. But what they did say is we do have the ability to do something like a golf cluster. And I think the way it's set up with the pattern down there and being a mixed-use area, you can still do that. So think about bringing Golf Pride, something akin to Golf Pride, into Pioneer South. That could be done. And I think the plan sets up for it very nicely because you have 20 to 40 acres of developable land south of Blake Boulevard, east of NC5. Right now, that's on the market. And this is it. So you start to see all this, the white colors, everything that's undeveloped. This is going to be a residential subdivision. The Pioneer South cottages over here on the right. But all this is currently, I think most of this is currently being marketed in some way, shape, or form right now.
That's all zoned commercial now.
That is zoned two things. It's zoned the north half, the majority of it is zoned neighborhood commercial. So neighborhood commercial is in this particular area, which allows about 35 different types of uses. And then down here on this smaller piece, which is about 10 acres, that's zoned office and professional. So office and professional down here, NC up here. So that makes up the majority of that area.
Is any of that land owned by the village?
No, none of that land is owned by the village over in this area, correct? No.
In fact, it's privately owned and almost,
It
there's
is.
really just two owners, aren't there? Or
Correct, there's two different
In those two
owners.
sections, right.
And you've seen one of the owners showed up at the open house that we
Right.
had that one day.
I'm just trying to verify. So from a standpoint of ownership of all this land around here, on the east side, none of it is owned by the village.
Correct.
On the west side, there's those few acres, 7 acres or so, somewhere there?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the extent of it?
Yes. Oh, well, yeah, we've got this area which is zoned this is zoned RMF. So this is zoned for multiple family over here. North, you got Trotter
That's
Hill.
privately held.
That is private.
So I'm trying to
correct.
distinguish
Oh, sure,
between
yes.
private and
Sure.
publicly owned. Okay.
Sure, the only thing that we really own in that area is the fire station. Fire station
We
number 2.
own, yeah, and then to the west
Right here.
of Trotter Hills, where his
It's
hand
outside
is
the
now,
boundary.
we own that property there.
Right here where the X is, where my hand is, right here.
The village owns about 9 acres in
9
that.
acres there.
Just west of it, adjacent to Trotter Hills.
Gotcha.
And if you see some of for our pedestrian and the pedestrian connection proposal, we're actually trying to figure out ways that we can potentially connect these two areas with some type of walking path. So when we originally did the comp plan, we had looked at primary uses targeted for this area include medical, life science, and research facilities. Supporting uses may include retail, service, and some residential above first floor non-residential uses. So you can see as far back as 2019, when we did this comp plan, again, we were looking at trying to create that mixed-use environment within this area, to the point that I think right here, we're showing about 181 units of stacked residential on the east side of NC5. This is the focus area 2 map, the land use map, and you can see mixed use center, stacked residential. This whole area, you can see, we came up kind of with that recommendation for that area. Now this thing has changed a little bit because we have the Pioneer South cottages. That's going to take a chunk out of that, and that will all be residential. You have the existing neighborhoods really down here in Jackson Hamlet that they'll probably stay residential for a while. But then again, you have this large assemblage, about almost 40 acres of property here, that is, available for development. And the development itself, the utilities are to the north. So the utilities to service this area are really coming from the north to the south versus the south to the north. So the development pattern's, going to probably come in through the northern tract here first before it gets down to the southern areas, because you got to bring the utilities, you got to bring a road down that way, things like that. This is kind of the illustrative concept of what a mixed-use area could look like. This is a green space within the area. Again, people out enjoying, these are workers or residents of the area. One of the other big things in the comp plan was to expand housing choices. And this I think this was something that we were trying to achieve a little bit with that single-family housing, attached single-family housing, was those who are interested in different types of housing in the community voiced an interest in single-story, maintenance-free living with garages options for those who still drive. So I think, some of that was in our mind when we came up with some of those recommendations for that plan. And that's really about it that I need to, the last thing we covered was public input on neighborhood space destinations. And we talked about, we did some surveys on, what kind of preferences would people like to have in some type of park? And they said community gardens, neighborhood parks, picnic, dog parks, picnic center or gazebo, neighborhood playfield, neighborhood playground. All of these that I've circled here are elements that we've shown in that 5 to 6 acre park below Blake Boulevard. So these are all things that we could potentially put within that 5 acre assemblage of land if we could make that work. And that's really all I have on the comp plan itself. So we can move to the next thing, which would be discussion of the plan itself. And really from my standpoint with the plan itself. Hey, Kelly, can you pull up my PowerPoint, please?
Before we go into that, Darren, what you've handed out is something new. I'm going to characterize it as it's new to us in this format.
That's correct.
From the comp plan.
Correct.
And the point you're trying to make, I think, is that the plans that have been presented, some variations of them anyway, are consistent with or being covered by key areas of the comp plan, as you point out in this handout. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're trying to keep us mindful of what the comp plan said and what, in this case, Pinehurst South is trying to accomplish by meeting the goals of the comp plan.
Correct.
So there's some interesting things here pulled out. I think we've seen, I've seen all of this before in the comp plan itself in certain different ways, but this is a little bit interesting, more than a little bit, because it gives us a view of maybe a more consistent view of how to consolidate a lot of ideas that are around. So I appreciate having this. I think it's something to reflect on and review tonight, but also as we kind of continue through this process. And we will get to a decision on this at some point. Now, the other thing is, and I think maybe you're going to get into it now, as I've looked at this, and everybody's looked at it for some time, we have this competition between the traffic on Highway 5, right, which we don't like. We're trying to do something to correct or amend or alleviate. And we have the issue of density. And the two things are kind of at odds with each other. Because arguably, if you have density, meaning I'll use that in terms of residential type of facilities, residential homes of various types, that's going to cause less traffic on Highway 5 day to day than something that's more commercial, which is going to bring trips back and forth from whatever commercial businesses, retail businesses might be in the area. So this is the yin and the yang of where I think minds are, maybe at least mine is, on how do we balance our desire to watch our density, and also how do we do that in a way that doesn't create extra volume to Highway 5 to the degree we can control and manage any of this. Some of this we can control. A lot of it we cannot, but we can plan accordingly, and that's the whole reason for the exercise.
And you're correct. I mean, anything that we do in that area is going to add trip counts to Highway 5. Some uses are going to add more, some uses are going to add less. Residential typically will have less trips than does a commercial. But when we look at, there are not that many nodes that you could create this mixed-use environment to create, kind of create another village center with people being able to maybe potentially live down there and walk to there from the adjacent neighborhood. So coming down Monticello, you could save some of those trips. But you're correct. It's going to add potentially to Highway 5, which is another reason why we have to continue as we do, it's a comp plan goal is to try and figure out how do we lessen congestion on Highway 5? What do we need to do to improve, creating that right turn lane potentially on Morganton Road? So things like that. We've talked about the Western Connector. Nothing's a panacea, but, when you start looking at adding all these things up, they could potentially have an impact. And what you see from Blake Boulevard down is they're actually going to extend, they're going to widen out and create more lanes going to the south. So from that direction going south, it's going to get easier, but going north, yeah, it's going to start to, you have to choke down and you're stuck with that, potentially with that 2 lanes until you get to a certain point.
And I think we have to continue to be aware that eventually the expansion of Highway 5, as you've just spoken about, is going to happen. It may be pushed out years into the future, not too many, but that expansion is going to occur, at least up to roughly the Pinehurst borders, where the road can be expanded. And that's another issue that we need to, kind of have in mind. So density versus traffic, how do we balance that? And then are we trying to create a community in this area? You've used a phrase again tonight, a walkable community. Are we interested in creating a community, or are we interested in doing just certain zoning things that try to manage and control density and traffic?
And let me add one thing to that, John, as well. This would be, whatever you pass tonight is simply the plan. The plan doesn't implement itself. We have to come up with the phase 2. And really the phase 2 of this is what zoning adjustments do we need to make to implement that. If you're watching what we're doing at the Planning and Zoning Board right now, we're doing that. We're looking at the regulating plan, which is going to control the types of land uses that are going to be in portions of that district where active frontage should be. We're going to look at density. We're going to look at all those things. This plan is just that guidebook to get us there.
Yeah, well, I don't know that we'll pass anything tonight or not. I'm taking on your comment there. I hope we could. That's up to all of us here. But I do think there's this balance that's sort of hard to reconcile between density, traffic, and then this idea, are we trying to just do zoning, or are we trying to create a community? Are we trying to do something with the park, which initially wasn't even in the Pinehurst South Plan?
Correct.
We had input on that, not only from council members over the past 2 years, but also from the public about doing something to create a park down there. Now, in my view, the park should be some sort of a walking facility, although we've talked about ball fields and things down there at one time or another too. But it seems to me that, creating a community there is the better way to go if we can do, rather than just straight zoning. But how do we do that again to balance this issue of traffic and residential density? So that's where my mind is on it, and it isn't all decided. I don't think it is on the other members of the council too, but we'll get into that now. Now, you had a couple other designs you wanted to show us, and one's on the screen right now.
Well, the ones on the screen right now just kind of shows how, how that area could come together with streets and sidewalks, things like that. So you can, and connected green spaces. So you can see number one is that 5+ acre park, but that 5+ acre park can also connect. We could connect that to the east side or the west side of Highway 5, and then potentially a north leading up to this, this core area where we see this as being, an opportunity to put a restaurant, to put a coffee shop, things like that in this particular area. And so this just kind of shows how this could lay out. Now, this, when somebody's looking at potentially developing, this 27 acres here, they're going to look at the plan and go, this is where roads could potentially be. So that's what this plan helps do. It helps inspire kind of thinking when somebody looks at this, when somebody's looking at this land, how could this area come together? And we've shown how this area could potentially come together. So this is nothing more than just trying to show how this area could actually lay out. Then we showed the park. We showed this mixed-use concept around the park with the single-family attached to the south and this mixed-use or commercial to the north. That's kind of the elements of what could be in the park. We've talked about this before, the shared use path that we've talked to, been in talks before, some talks with ACWR, just to talk about the concept of potentially getting this regional path connection along their right-of-way up and down NC5, which would be a great addition to the area. This was, the proposed circulation plan shows nothing more than how again, how the streets could lay out within this particular area, with that potential to potentially lower this, relocate Monticello. Street designs in here, so there's different street designs for commercial streets and residential streets. And this was really, this is what we spent a lot of time focusing on at Planning and Zoning Board, was kind of this illustration that shows how the buildings, you see a definite pattern to the north of that non-residential, potentially mixed use here to the north of the park, and that residential pattern to the south of the park. And at the end of the day, the Planning and Zoning Board said, nah, let's go away from that concept, because we think that, things like the golf cluster, the interest in Pinehurst is really, there's a lot of interest of people wanting to be in this area. Let's reserve that for at least commercial office on the first floor, potentially to mixed use on the second floor. So that's really the only major issue that really has come out of this plan so far with respect to the proposed land uses. And you can see, so you can see.
Sections G and H.
Yeah.
Especially on the east side.
G, H, and I. Yep, that
that's where
has been,
That's where our focus should be.
that's correct.
Now, you just said, I think you said, use the word mixed use, but that would have residential on the upper floor. That's what
Correct.
you mean by that, right?
Yes.
With some sort of retail or
Retail, office.
office on the first floor of a hypothetical building to be in this place.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, one of the other things that I don't think we've focused on enough here at the council, and that is, and it came up at the planning board, the infrastructure, water, sewer, all these sort of things. What can we sustain there? I don't know that we've spent a lot of time looking at that, but I think it's something that needs to be in the mix, going forward. I don't hear a lot of conversation about that, but is this anything you're concerned with at the staff level, Darren?
No, we've talked a little bit to Moore County Utilities, and there's lines in the area that can service the area, and they're really up here mostly to the north, so that the development pattern, the utility pattern, is going to have to extend to the south, and typically you're going to extend the south using the road systems. So we think it's serviceable based on our conversations.
What other slides do you want to present, and then we'll go questions, if there are any.
No, I mean, here was kind of that core area that shows, here's the Boys and Girls Club. Here is that like garage structure out here that could be some type of farmer's market or incubator, something like that. We're showing, this is the Moore County Home Builders site. This could be potentially a restaurant, offices over here. We're showing potentially a restaurant, or not a restaurant, but a coffee shop, but it could be a restaurant in this area. I've talked to the property owners in this area, and they really like this concept that I showed them. One of the property owners, they like this concept, and they're trying to they've talked to other people to see what they could do to potentially make this vision happen. So she's talking about that. We've also talked to people on the Mahaley track south of Blake Boulevard, that 28 acres, and the concept for having a mixed-use, office mixed-use environment was something that we talked to potentially interested developers on. So there's some interest in developing that, or getting into that, and potentially they see a future for mixed use in that area. Whether that actually comes together as mixed use, or whether it just becomes offices or offices and retail, well, the market can only tell that, because mixed-use buildings are not always the easiest to develop. You need to have the appropriate housing on top, things like that. There has to be an interest in the area. So people living above a business, there really has to be something for them to do in that area. So mixing in retail, having a place to walk, having a park, we're trying to set up all those characteristics of that mixed-use neighborhood within Pinehurst South and Village Place.
I suppose maybe the best of all worlds would be a Golf Pride type company in Pinehurst South.
It'd be great, I think.
That could be the resolution to a lot of issues right there. Just with that one company that would take up a fair amount of the space, not a lot of traffic coming back and forth, hypothetically anyway, and some other things in there, but not a lot of residential, some other.
Correct. It could just become a pure golf cluster. So the plan, even zoning, is not going to mandate it be mixed use. Right now, the NC, you know, the neighborhood commercial zoning in place allows you to have mixed use, but it doesn't mandate it. So the plan's not going to mandate that you have mixed use in this area. It's going to say that you can have mixed use. So it's going to, so there will be some flexibility in the plan itself. So, you know, Golf Pride, Wind Grips, name any golf type of manufacturer that wants to have a Pinehurst address, this could be a very good place for them to locate.
Okay. Other slides you want to mention, then we'll go ahead. All right. I think council members probably have, as I've already started, some thoughts and questions. Jane, do you want to bring some thoughts to the table here?
Yeah, I have some things to say.
Use your
Do you want
mic.
me to- Should I go first?
Sure. Feel like.
My first thought about Pinehurst South is that we should be designing it to the capacity of the infrastructure. And Route 5, as I understand it, is pretty much already full. It's got 20,000 vehicle trips per day is what I remember from the traffic study. And the high and low plans, as depicted in here, would add between 32 for the low plan and 36% increase in the amount of traffic. So that's not really viable. And the traffic study says in this plan, well, you should stretch out the actual development of the area over 30 to 50 years so that people don't notice the extra traffic. Okay, that's what it says. And they say that maybe Route 5 will get better when they widen the road from Blake Avenue to the south, although I can't imagine how that's going to make anything better. And they say it's probably not going to be possible to widen it to the north, given the railroad, proximity of the railroad tracks and so forth and so on. But, gee, maybe eventually the Department of Transportation will come in and make some improvements. Who knows? So this plan isn't designed to the capacity of the infrastructure. And don't forget, Route 5 is really the only way out. Well, that's not entirely true. There is Monticello, but that's an established residential neighborhood. That shouldn't be turned into a cut-through. So what do we do about that? Now, that's one thing. Now, the next thing was, last time that we looked at the plan briefly at their last meeting, and you said mixed use, and I said, what are you talking about? There's not going to be mixed use. You said, well, yes, there is. And I said, no, there are. Anyway, I went back and looked at this plan, and pages 72 and 73 on this plan, 72 is the low density, and 73 is the high density. And at the top of each page, there's a chart that says, here's how many units of residential, dwelling units, and how much square footage for different types of commercial. In the high-density plan, it's really not possible. They give a number of how many additional residential units they're talking about, 288 additional residential units, okay?
On my side.
But because they are depicted on the plan as many of them as being multifamily or attached, you can't really count them as those little dots on the plan, but you can count them when you're looking at the low density, because the low density plan says they're all detached. And so you've got 13 or 14 along the south side of Monticello, which for some reason this plan, that area on the south side of Monticello right now is zoned office professional. And it only has 9 lots along there, and why they have changed it to 13 lots of residential is beyond me, but those are some of them. And then see, I'm talking now about on the chart, the east side of Route 5 would have an additional 42 dwelling units. And then if you count the ones around the park on Block H, is where you get the remaining, 23 or however many it was. So you can see where the dwelling units are in this plan. This plan says there's going to be some more dwelling units on Monticello and some more dwelling units around the park. If there was going to be mixed use intended in this plan, there would be something set out in this chart. But no, it just says commercial in this chart. And then I went back and listened to the Planning and Zoning Board's meeting in May, and that meeting, each one of the members went through and gave a little statement about how they wanted the plan to be for their board's recommendation to us. And they said they wanted to be non-residential. And part of the reason for that is the idea of having a mixed-use walkable neighborhood with retail stores and people living right close to the retail, and they can walk to the coffee shop and they can walk to pick up, some groceries every day and all this kind of thing, and it's all very cozy and quaint and sort of like a little European city, and it's, that's a model, that's a thing, and it's a popular one right now. But it doesn't necessarily belong everywhere, it doesn't work everywhere. And for Pinehurst South, I don't know that that's necessarily the best vision. What was planned for this? And I sat through in 2019, as you know, all those discussions, work sessions and so forth on the comprehensive plan. And my understanding, my takeaway on Pinehurst South was, holy smokes, we've got a whole bunch of undeveloped land down here. How are we going to use it? What are we going to do with it? And nobody quite knew. And they said, well, actually, right now it's zoned commercial, and having office there would be good because we don't have anywhere else to put office. That would be a great land bank for office uses in the future if we need them. And whatever references to residential were sort of like, well, maybe if the office doesn't work out. So I am looking at this from a practical point of view of building to the capacity or designing to the capacity of the infrastructure, number one. And number two, I don't see how having people try to live upstairs from an office park is the same thing at all as living upstairs from the cute little shops such as we would have in the village center. It's not the same thing at all. And I think we're better off not trying to mix uses in this area. If residential belongs in some of it, that's one thing to think about. If office belongs in some of it, that's something else to think about. But I think trying to mix them is a mistake. I don't think we're trying to design another village place down here. From what I understand about, and which is, a limited amount about the ITE, traffic, trip generation, so forth. General office generates few traffic trips per day because people come to the office in the morning, they stay there all day, and they go home at night. Compared to retail, which may need the same number of parking spaces per floor area square footage as office, but there's a lot more turnover. And particularly if you have something like a grocery store, those retail things that serve a population, then you're going to have a lot of vehicle trips, and they're going to be drawn in, which we don't need to do. We don't need to draw in more vehicle trips here. Residential doesn't have as many vehicle trips as retail, et cetera, but I think we need to stick with low trip generating, and that's going to mean staying away from retail. And that, I think the office model was designed partly to have that resource available for the village, and for a while there, it looked like we might not really ever have much office for an awful long time. But then with the advent of the USGA and the golf industry and so forth, it looks like it's probably going to be more possible to put office in there. So I think we do want to stay away from medical, because that has a very, very high turnover of traffic for patients. But general office use, light industry use, that can all go in here as a resource for the village, which we don't have other places to put that kind of thing. And we'll keep the trip generation low.
Let me respond to just a couple things there. When we started this process, first of all, going back to comp plan, there's the comp plan. That was in the comp plan, to create that mixed use center, stacked residential, and they'd shown potentially 181 living units in there. That's just a wag. I mean, it's a guess based on, you know, the amount of available land. So our goal when we started this process was, I just shared with you all the mixed use, create these mixed use nodes in Village Place and Pinehurst South. So when we started this process, we were trying to follow what was in this comp plan. And it wasn't to create a dead office park after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We were trying to create that active mixed-use environment with, you know, housing that, you know, there's people who live along Monticello that might want to walk to some of these things, or in some of these other neighborhoods. So that was our charge when we created the plan. If we want to change the plan now to something else, tell me. We can do it. Tell me you only want offices in this particular area. We can make the change. I think it runs contrary to everything that, you know, we put together in that 2019 comprehensive plan. I think it does run contrary to it. I understand the trips and all that, but it runs contrary to what was in that comprehensive plan. But we can do it. If you make the recommendation that this should all be an office park.
No. Hey, Darren.
I need a consensus, because, you know, some of the things that you saw how far I was behind on a lot of these IAPs and OFIs when I get through this process. So I can move on to the next project. So if we can get to this plan, so I can get to phase 2, which is working on that form-based code, which is where when we start to change the zoning and we start to look at building types and building uses in this area, we're recreating the zoning districts in this area to suit what's in this regulating plan. So what's in the small area plan. So what's in the small area plan is very important for us when we start working on phase 2 at the planning and zoning board level.
We
And
should be very clear about where we were.
exactly. So you know, the planning and zoning board is clear. We don't want any residents, the single family residential. We can always go back and clarify. When I say non-residential, mixed use is a non-residential product because the primary part of the building on the first floor is non-residential. Above it, and it's classified as a commercial structure. So I have my old inspector cap on and building official cap on. That's how we looked at because that's how we look at or mixed use, because mixed use can also go into the second floor. You can have commercial on the second floor too. So it allows for mixed use residential, or mixed use, just mixed use on the first and second floor with retail on the bottom floor, office on the top floor, things like that. So mixed use has always been in the vernacular in a concept for both here and Village Place. You'll see the same, it doesn't just, you'll see in both plans, we talked about creating that mixed-use activity center. Again, if y'all don't want that, if it's not a good idea, if you don't think it's a good idea, make a recommendation. We can change that land use, and we don't have to move forward with a regulating plan that has any mixed-use buildings south of Blake Boulevard, east of NC5. We can do that. I just need some consensus from you on that. So when we start working on a regulating plan, we know what direction that we're supposed to be going in from y'all.
May I say something?
Let me ask you one other thing, if I may. So are you looking to have both of these adopted? The low and the high density?
No, you adopt the plan, and it shows how the area could come together, whether it's low or high. We'd look at it from a regulating plan standpoint and go, all right, should we, can we go with the lower, if there's a preference on either of them, a lower intensity or higher intensity. There was never when we were going through this process, there wasn't a preferred whether it was low or high. So we always presented you with two potential options for the way the area could come together. With respect to Village Place, there was one central kind of plan that everybody kind of recommended around. On Pinehurst South, we couldn't get any specific direction on a high or low or what have you, and that's why we brought them both into the plan as concepts that we could carry forward.
That seems unclear to me, but I can see bringing elements from each of these two plans into one.
Okay.
And I would, starting at Monticello, leave.
Shane, one second. Now look at these two. When we talk about low and high, so here's low, right? So if you look at low, look at the diagram. So low is you see single family along the south side of that park area, and then you go over on the west side showing how it would potentially come together as single family. Single family can locate in these districts. So that's why we showed what it would look like potentially as a single family pattern. Then you go to high. What's the difference with high? You're seeing single family attached, and you're seeing multiple family over on the west side where you can put multiple family uses. So it just shows under kind of the existing zoning umbrella how that area could come together under existing potentially under existing zoning with a residential category. Sorry.
Lydia, I think you had some questions.
Yeah, I will admit, I got sidetracked in the last meeting because I listened to planning and zoning. When planning and zoning said non-residential, I thought nobody will live in there. And then I found out non-residential is mixed use. Non-residential does not mean that nobody can live there. And you straightened me out on that one. And then I thought, and I've said this before, when all else fails, go back to the comp plan. And you look at the comp plan for Focus Area 2 on page 77. It could include a residential component as well. Right below that, implementation strategies supported with small-scale retail services and residential uses. You go over to page 79. Supporting uses may include retail service and some residential above first floor non-residential uses. And I finally realized when planning said non-residential, what they were saying was take out that single-family detached, correct?
That was my understanding, but I can always go back and talk to them about that again to see if make sure that we're all on the same page. But when I'm using non-residential, it's not single-family residential. It's not single-family or even an apartment building.
But in my when all else fails, go back to the comp plan, and you did a beautiful job of pulling stuff out here. And I go back to what has this community asked for, and to me, it's consistent through everything that you pulled out here that what you're proposing on this on the screen right now is what the community has asked for with it, but if you take out the single family detached. So if you've got the mixed use and you've got, well, everything that's on the diagram there. And so I don't know why we would depart from what the community has said they would want. And it's in the comp plan and it's in the small area plan. And I know traffic is I don't know, what is your response to, if you hear their traffic concerns, what is your response to that?
Turn it all into a large park. everything's going to create some level of traffic that's going to add a trip count, there's no doubt. But when we look at the mixed use does capture some internal traffic. But once again, when we look at it too, I mean, a lot of it's a guess. I mean, you don't know how fast, and there is there's a discussion point of, I think we've got 400,000 square feet of office in there. And when you start to look at the absorption rates that we're absorbing, and right now we're absorbing, what, 10 to 20,000 square feet of office a year, and that's up in Trotter Hills. If it's that, it's going to take, generally under the current market circumstances, a long time for this to develop out. If it was residential, if we changed it to residential, single-family residential, or even SFD, it'd be probably a lot quicker because there's a lot of interest in residential in this area. And that was why they, it stated that in the market analysis, and it's something that we all know. Residential is in demand around here.
Well, I don't know why we would abandon the comp plan. When the comp plan, all the pages you've given us from the comp plan are manifest here, I'm not sure why we would abandon the comp plan.
How is the lots right now? How are they zoned?
How's the what zone? I'm
Does
sorry.
the lots we're talking about, the undeveloped lots that you showed, how are they zoned right now?
The undeveloped lots are, here you mean?
You mean that whole space?
Basically, yeah, you showed a series of different lots
Oh,
that
that-
were open from the different presentation. The bottom line, that's where it's going. That's where we're
That's
talking about
correct.
going,
That's
okay?
it's all currently zoned NC. Well, the majority of it is zoned neighborhood commercial, which allows for mixed use, and below that is OP. OP actually allows for mixed use as well. So it's all zoned NC or OP.
Okay. I have not met many land investors who are investing in the land to keep it from being developed. So if you already have plots of land that are looking to be sold here, the probable intent is over the next 30 to 50 years, it's going to be developed there. It's coming one way or another, okay? I certainly agree with Lydia's comments right now about I think this does address the comp plan. We're not going to stop the growth. What we need to do is manage the growth. And what's being presented on here is management of what our citizens are asking for. When you talk about stretching out 30 to 50 years on there so they don't notice the increase in the traffic, my understanding was that maybe in 30 to 50 years we'll come up with a traffic solution. I bet even this legislative body could do it in that time frame. So the point of this is that I concur with you, traffic is a huge issue. We have to address it. But this growth is coming whether we want it or not. So let's look at this, let's manage this, which I concur, this is a perfect, not perfect, this is an appropriate plan to develop this property, and then let's start working on traffic issues also. So I do recommend that we go to option 2 on this, as being requested, and moving forward with this. I do think this supports what the citizens of our community want. That's all I've got.
So you're if I heard you right, the recommendation from the planning board, Jeff, option 2 is what you're supporting at this time.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, Lydia, you had some questions. Were you through?
Oh, no, I'm through.
Okay. Jeff, is there anything more you wanted to say to
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yeah, I have a few observations and comments. One, there is a huge difference between what we did in Village Place and what we're looking now in South. One has Highway 5 going through it. The other is not impacted really by Highway 5. In the Village area, a lot of the land that is potential for development is actually in the hands of the village. 5.3 acres is our complex, and there's another 3 acres, which is owned by Moore County. So together you have 8.3 acres that the village can be a player in if we get around to solving that issue of our public services complex. Village Place, it has a great proximity to our downtown shopping and retail areas. It's actually walkable, which helps with that walkability issue we talk about. The only thing I can see that's walkable along Highway 5 there on the east side is people can walk to the post office and the ABC store as of now. There are shops put in there. There'll be other things they can walk to. We have recreation facilities adjoining the Village Place area. Ball fields, tennis courts, community center. Over there, there's not much to say to offer the citizens regarding a convenient area where they can play ball, for lack of a better phrase. We all are looking for, I joined the mayor in the search for the golf pride is the sweet spot that we seek, of the type of business and company that light manufacturing, a wonderful brand, does not get a lot of foot traffic and automobile traffic compared to any other type of development that you'd have there. We also have two things that we've got to be cognizant of along that Highway 5 area. One is the undeveloped but standing there pit golf course, which is back there, and the rear entrance to CCNC, which would be impacted by whatever type of development goes on. Whereas over here, we have less of that, those two sort of large, what I'll call large concerns. I've gone over the three plans. You gave us one in January, one in May, and now this. All very similar. It's not strikingly different. But there's several things that are very consistent. One is that the consultant, who I wish was here, and I could talk to them, but they decline our invitations to show, is that if we adopt this plan as is, there is no question we will get more congestion on Highway 5. It's not even disputable. It's inevitable. The issue is, how much more do we get depending on what plan we adopt? But either plan that's presented to us at the moment is pretty significant in the way that traffic is going to go up. If there was a fix immediately in front of us, the widening of the road or something, that would be sort of something we could help mitigate the situation with, but it doesn't exist. We've got a railroad track there, and we've got only so much land on either side. Let me separate this two sides of Highway 5. On the west side, where there are right now some single-family homes as you go south towards Aberdeen, there are little pockets of development. I think there's Abington Hills, and you know where I'm referring to. So there's a presence right now of some single-family homes and a neighborhood. The east side is pretty blank, except for an occasional commercial spot there, and a very small development of some homes. Is that Jackson Road, or I can't remember which road.
Arnett?
Arnett, I'm sorry.
Olivia and Arnett.
Okay.
Olivia, Arnett.
So, barring finding the sweet spot of a company, and we only need really one or two out of this whole country that, one, want to be in Pinehurst, and two, find the land that's there, which is on the other side of a railroad track, which, does not make it the most presentable and marketable piece of land. But again, you only have to find one or two companies. Would be wonderful. We don't have that, and we don't own that land. But the current plan, and I made some notes of reading it, is pretty dramatic in what they describe as the traffic potential problems for us. And then the consultant is telling us this is going to take you from, well, I learned about this level of service. Level of service A is the nirvana for traffic flow. This would take us to, well, we're already at sort of D, but they're talking about this maybe taking us to level of service F or E. I don't know, it just doesn't sound to me like something I'd want to push. I wish we could have something else. I too, on what Lydia mentioned, the residential, non-residential, mixed use. I mean, if you had some small commercial outlets and above it was a dentist's office, an accountant's office, if that could work, I don't know, that's sort of one of those, again, it's sort of a dream model. But in the same breath, if above that you have people that live there, that changes the area and the mix. I was impressed with the Village Place diagrams, the thoughtfulness that went into it, the options. We've got, two not really nice choices that we would be putting Highway 5 in even worse situation than it is now. I wish I had an alternative to say, why don't we do this? But I come up with the same thing that I've heard from some of my colleagues. If we can just find that right sort of company or two, and they were to be able to fit in there, we would minimize the additional traffic on Highway 5. We know we're going to get more traffic, but we could minimize that. We can make improvements along Highway 5. I'm very much in favor of that greenway pathway that they have laid out there, because that will help people who shop and or live there on the east or west side to be able to maneuver in our village. I am not a proponent of changing Monticello Road, restructuring it so we can put some houses in there and whatever. I'm not fond of that. But at any rate, the plan leaves me cold. The options leave me cold, and I'm in search of a solution, which is what I prefer. But I don't see this with these.
Just a second. On your point of Monticello, which you just commented on, I think the staff has recommended repeatedly, and including in this note here, that we can separate that decision. That's a decision outside of what's really happening here in these key areas of the land that's available on Highway 5. That's another decision on that. So we'll have a chance to consider that in.
That would require significant investment by us to make that Monticello realignment happen.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
I'm sorry, Lydia.
Let me ask a question. We know to do nothing is not an option, because right now it's hodgepodge development, so it could come in. In fact, I remember planning and zoning was frustrated when the cottages came in because it was zoned R5, and they'd hoped that we'd done something so we could do something more consistent with the comprehensive plan. To do nothing is not an option. We will adopt something, and you guys will begin proposing the zoning changes. Now, as we go through that, at some point, can a golf pride or is anything we're doing that's consistent with the comp plan and consistent with this going to rule out a golf pride or some golf industry? Because planning and zoning talked a lot about golf industries coming in, and I'm concerned that it sounds as though we've got some concern that if we approve this, it's going to prohibit some of those golf businesses coming in. And that's something planning and zoning talked about. A lot's happened since the comp plan, USGA, but we've got to do something. We've got to change the zoning. The zoning can be consistent with our comp plan and consistent with this. And golf businesses that we desire could still come in.
Correct. I mean, correct. And the existing zoning does allow for that to happen. So if the idea is we just want to maintain the status quo, allow for mixed use, allow for the golf industry, we could just let the moratorium up. We could not work on any of the architectural standards that we're working on, the regulating plan, which limits the types of uses. And you'd have an NC and OP district that both allow for, right, Alex? They'd both allow
a wide array of any of these
Sorry,
type
Alex.
of uses we've talked about. A wide array of uses.
Under the current zoning.
Under the current zoning, yes.
Okay.
So, and
Darren, is it fair to say the development of this areas we're talking about here under the vacant land, under the current zoning, could in fact develop in a manner that would be more dense and create more traffic than this plan
I think Jeff Sanborn,
potentially happen?
Jeff pointed that out at one point. And Patrick, to your point about walkability, there's a great diagram in here of proposed walkways, so it creates a ton of walkability in here, this plan.
The other point that Jeff Sanborn has made in past is that if retail, if it's the right retail mix, is, in this area, it can pick off traffic from going further into the village. People in the lake area may not get on Highway 5 and go to Morganton and on to NC2 if they have something here that meets those needs. I don't know that happens or doesn't, but it is a possibility.
So, one key point here, though, is that the current zoning would allow higher density than any of than the plans we're considering, the 2 or 3 options to that. That's been a theme for some time. Is that true or false?
Well, we really haven't established the density yet. That would come with a regulating plan, but the current, I don't know what the density calcs are with an NC right now or an OP, but it does allow for more intense development of the land. Both NC and OP allow for that.
Well,
Right.
Why do you think it hasn't been developed yet? I mean, it's what? Well, no, it's only been under a moratorium for a year or so. I mean, it's been vacant like that for, I don't know, since Tufts came down.
Christopher Columbus.
I don't know how long it's been on the market. We'd have to talk. I don't know how long they've been actively marketing it or trying to get it out there. But it also could be just the market conditions have changed within our regional market, and we know that there's a lot of growth pressures. There's a lot of growth pressures into North Carolina, into this region. In particular, you talked about Partners in Progress or Ward County Development.
Right.
Not yet. January 1.
I think the point you're on is the absorption rate, or one of them.
Yes.
My personal opinion is that these absorption rates we've talked about and been told about for Village Place on the one hand or Pinehurst South on the other, that take things into the 20, 30, 40, 50-year time frame. I think for Pinehurst at this time, those absorption rates are way longer than what we're going to see. Maybe not for the complete development of the property, but I'm pretty sure that once we adopt Village Place, get that done, once we adopt Pinehurst South, there's going to be interest in whatever it is we allow to happen in those areas, from residential to commercial or whatever, excuse me. So the absorption rates to me are an important consideration because I want to make sure that what we do is something we're going to be happy with right away. Because my opinion is there's going to be interest right away in whatever we decide to do. So it's not going to wait 10 years or 20. It's going to happen pretty soon for at least some of this stuff.
Well, and the one thing I would add to that is look at Trotter Hills. Look at how long Trotter Hills had set in a relatively vacant state, and now we've just had last 4 years we've had a lot of interest, but that's still only we're not absorbing more than 20,000 square feet a year. I don't believe.
Well, but
the
the buildings
a little bit larger.
Pocketed in there, and that's a good example of my point is that Trotter Hills has been waited for a while in different economic times, but now it's been cruising right along, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Let me see if we can draw some conclusions here, do a little quick review. First thing is that if we look at option 2, right? If we look at option 2, and we seem to talk about the west side and the east side, Highway 5 a lot, but option 2 would apply to both sides of the road. I've been concentrating on the east side and the effect of that, but it's going to apply to both sides of the road. We all clear on that?
It applies to this. What was option 2 is written for the
Just for sections G and H?
G, H, and I.
For the east side of the road, then? All right.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
why I have it circled on here in the plan.
Right.
That's where we focused our conversation. We weren't focusing really on the west side.
right. And so the development of the west side, as it currently stands, or anything we'd recommend here, is going to be a residential type product, right?
Correct.
All right, so
Except for the stuff potentially along Highway 5, but yes.
yeah, on the front there. All right. So And if we adopt the option 2, the non-residential option, let's get back to your definition again. What are we really talking about that can happen in G&H for the non-residential option? Define again what would be allowed there in terms of types of structures, mixed use, which includes residential, as you talked about a little while ago. What would happen?
Well, we would remove the ability to put a single-family attached or detached, or, there's no apartments that would be allowed in that area, in favor of a non-residential, which could include a mixed-use building with residential, but I can always go back and clarify to make sure that the Planning and Zoning Board was on that same opinion with it. But when I refer to
I see.
mixed-use building, it's going to be,
All
it's
right,
going to be
so
both,
that's
can
my
be
point.
both residential.
And that's my point. And as we were talking about earlier on in this discussion tonight, non-residential doesn't mean non-residential completely. It means there could be some residential in mixed use.
Yeah, generally the primary.
Fine, all right.
The primary frontage is the
that-
primary floor is that first floor.
But there'd be no single-family detached or
Correct.
multifamily attached structure,
Correct.
residential in
That is correct.
G&H.
Correct.
Could happen other places.
That is correct.
All right, all right.
Just say
Alex,
like
you
it-
happy with that?
Yeah, just think of it as like it would not be a standalone residential use.
Say that again.
A standalone residential use. It would not be a standalone residential use.
So what, that means
Okay.
no townhouses,
Correct.
Correct.
no apartments?
Correct.
Well, but then I kept thinking, I heard you say that the mixed use
Yeah.
has apartments above it.
That's not standalone.
Standalone.
It's on the second floor, so it's,
All right. Now I get,
That's
I
what
get
you
it.
see
So
throughout the comp
Darren,
plan.
let me understand a couple things. In the traffic report, they're talking about approximately a 35% increase in traffic from these plans. But that 35% increase incorporates, it factors in this internal capture and the drive-by stuff that reduces everything by, 25% or something, and then they reduce it again by another something. So that 35%, if they hadn't done, would be 50% or more increase, okay? Those numbers, though, don't include mixed-use residential on top of the commercial, because it's not in these charts.
because you don't know.
It's not in these charts. So that, if that doesn't, it's not included. If we put, first of all, forgive me, but non-residential, anyway, if we allow mixed use, then we're adding something on top of what the traffic analysis anticipated, so that the 35% additional number of vehicle trips added to is going to be even higher. We should be looking at this now, even though we have a comprehensive plan. And again, you can read that comprehensive plan and find just about anything you want in there. We should be looking at it now as we drill down to the reality of the infrastructure problems that are there. I think it's irresponsible for us to not take this opportunity to replan. The zoning the underlying zoning that's there was put in place, 1980 or so? Okay? Now, we have the benefit of 40 years to see how things have developed and to look at how we expect things to develop into the future. We should be mindful of those infrastructure limitations. We should take the opportunity we have now to tailor our design for this, our plan for the development here, to work as best as it can with the resources that are available to it.
Jay, may I have a question there, though? When you're talking about infrastructure problems, I think you're referring, I would say, solely to traffic. because it's already been said tonight
By
that
taking
water,
pictures.
sewer, all that is there.
There.
That's not, those things are not infrastructure-related problems. Traffic may be.
I'm talking about traffic. I
Okay,
know that
so
that
just so we
water-
know what we're talking about.
Water and sewer is also a question, and I guess we don't really know the answer to that.
No, I think Darren said there'd been some discussion on that, and
I've talked to-
it's not a problem from Moore County Public Utilities' point of view. Is that correct?
The last time I conferred with them, I specifically asked, were there utilities in the area that could be expanded south to serve those southern parcels? They agreed. They said, yes, that can occur.
Okay. So from an infrastructure point of view, it's traffic
traffic.
and things related to that. Now, I'd like to vote on this tonight, but I think we have a couple questions here that we need to resolve, and that is, I think we're still looking at what is the definition of non-residential, and you just said you may need to go back to the planning board and make sure they understood what you meant by that. So I'm of an opinion that we should focus on option 2, but I would like to know, and I'd like to, maybe you could write to us, it's up to the council to decide what to do here, but I'd like to know specifically what uses would be available in this non-residential land use pattern as approved by the planning board, and is that what they understood? So that we know, too, exactly what could happen, just as we talked about 5 minutes ago here. What are the types of uses, what are the types of buildings, et cetera, we would see under this non-residential land use concept, option 2. So I'm of mind from the council here, was the council wish to vote on this tonight, or do you want to go back but I don't want this to go past the next meeting.
Yeah.
So I want to know and make sure everybody's clear about the uses and what we really mean by these words that are being used. I think we don't want any surprises. I don't want to wake up 3 months from now, finding out that there's a type of building that I didn't expect might be in this area, and I think the council shares that. Patrick?
If we can get the answers to a couple of questions, I'd be prepared to vote at the next meeting. My question, and I think one was what you asked, the clarification of that definition, okay? I'm sure that's achievable. I'd also like to know if we adopted Plan 2, that doesn't mess with the Monticello area, and can we limit the height of the buildings to 2 stories? Because that would have a big impact on me.
Well, yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, I think there's been some commentary on that in there that they're expecting the heights of the buildings to be 1 to 2 stories in height. But, as you looked at the regulating plan at the last Planning and Zoning Board meeting, the regulating plan has the maximum building heights. And this regulating plan would have the same thing. It would call for minimum and maximum building heights within various areas of the district. And this is, you're probably looking at 1 to 2. You are looking at 1 to 2, which is also, just so everybody knows, that's also a down zoning from what the current zoning currently allows, which would be 35 to, 35 feet? I believe.
I'm getting more comfortable if we can get an answer to that, and we can get a firm answer to a cap on the number of stories.
Patrick, I don't think it's the number of stories, it's feet.
Feet, whatever, yeah, I'm transplanting.
But have to do it from feet, from the ground level.
2 levels, I understand, because sometimes you're building
Yep.
below down,
Well-
okay. But I'd be much more comfortable facing that at our next meeting, and I don't think that's a big deal, but go ahead.
What do the other council members feel? Do you wish to have these sort of things defined further, or are you prepared to make a motion and vote?
I don't see where it's going to change my vote, because right now, when we're talking about non-residential, my understanding, it's as described here before, it's a potential of a mix in there, but it has to be something else based on the bottom floor that you're doing, and then it can be a residential above that. If it's not that, and the definition is it's just non-residential, that's moot, okay? Because now you're taking away just that residential component to it. And that's not going to change my vote, because I don't think it's going to change much on the traffic patterns that we're talking about. I also concur that traffic is a big issue, and we have to make sure that we're addressing traffic in the future here. But this is going to grow one way or another, okay? I'm ready to make the vote right now with the information that I have, because we do have a limitation on height. We also, the worst case scenario is it's mixed use in there when you say non-residential.
Thank you.
If you say it's non-residential, the worst-case scenario on there is it's mixed use.
Which
Okay,
would be
so
completely.
basically, it has a commercial entity with it, as well as a residential component on top of it.
And that's
That would
completely
be
consistent
doubling
with
the
the
amount
comp
of
plan.
traffic on those buildings.
And G, H, and I, you're looking at a very small section that's right there. You're still regulating it. Jane, it's going to grow anyway.
Not G, H, and I. It would be A, B, C, D, E, and F
No, that,
is where the mixed use would be.
No, I think it's G, H, and I. Correct me
well,
if I'm wrong.
that's where GH and I, we would flip that out to the similar pattern, which is above here, which is mixed use, commercial, retail, whatever. So to allow, it's like a VMU district. Imagine it being a VMU, or imagine it being a neighborhood commercial district, what it is already zoned for. The neighborhood commercial district is not a residential district, it allows residential. Same thing with VMU, so it allows mixed use. So the district would allow for mixed uses, which is currently allowed in the zoning, in the current zone, in the PDO permitted uses.
If the information is going to change your vote, I understand the argument of waiting.
Yeah.
Okay, if the information is not going to change your vote, I do not understand waiting. The information, for me, is not going to change my vote, so I'm ready to move ahead.
Well, I want a firmer confidence in the answer to the question the mayor posed and the one I asked. That will change my vote.
Yeah, and that's the reason I want to know too, so, all right. All right,
I'm not prepared to vote on this until I understand what the Planning and Zoning Board understood.
Question.
well, the input from the Planning and Zoning Board is always helpful and desired. However, I think the discussion tonight at the council and our earlier discussions have helped define very much more clearly, except for a couple of questions we've just put out, as to what our options are. So, and that's going to be a council decision at the end, whatever the planning board might wish to say or change. We've taken this to this level tonight, and I think we have, with a couple of questions yet to be answered, the ability to move forward on this at the next meeting, subject to those definitions, right? So unless I'm hearing otherwise, I think the consensus of the council is let's get those definitions in the most complete way you can, and the other question, and then we'll be able to talk about this on September whichever it is, 8th, 9th, the next meeting. All right. Darren, this has been very helpful. I want to go back to your initial handout, which even on the spot here clarified some things for me, and I'll look at that again. So thank you very much for doing that and trying to tie that together.
Thank you.
Are there any other thoughts as we let this subject go till the next meeting on this for Darren and Alex? All right, seeing none, we'll move on into the agenda then. I do think this has been very helpful, and I think we're getting to the point we'll make a decision on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren and Alex. Is there any other business to come before the Village Council?
I have one question. I'll
Patrick?
raise it opaquely. In the village manager's weekly report, Jeff Batten, that came from Jeff Sanborn, there was a second bullet item there that received, and I didn't know if that's appropriate for us to discuss or not. The one that dealt with the notice we received regarding stormwater.
Stormwater.
Oh, yeah.
Stormwater transaction. Yeah.
Yes, is
Yeah,
that
so-
appropriate to discuss or not? If it's not, I can pass, but I,
Do you have the details of that, Jeff? I'm not sure that you do, but
That's a litigation
yeah,
matter.
yeah,
It'd be better in closed session for that kind of an
yeah.
item.
fine, I'm fine with that.
I don't think the village is
I didn't quite
too
understand
involved in
that.
that, so anyway.
Okay.
All right, any other business? Seeing none, we'll move to comments from attendees. Is there a list of persons who wish to speak tonight? Thank you. The only person I have signed up, and I'll take others if we have time, Teresa Johns. Teresa? And that microphone is on, Teresa. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit louder. Put the microphone up if you would. You can either even put it on that upper.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Hello. I'm Teresa Johns, 50 Glen Abbey Trail. Talking about housing and short-term rentals. For the past several months, with your all desire to severely restrict short-term rentals, I kept saying to myself, there's more to this, it just doesn't add up. I've spoken with the police chief, I've went over crime statistics, I've looked at the quality of life survey, raw data, all 401 of those went by through hand last weekend. And by the way, of those who think or say they live near 3 or more short-term rentals, 85% say that their quality of life is excellent or good. So in all the discussion at the last council meeting and nitpicking through all kinds of data on the quality of life survey, I don't recall hearing that statistic, so I want to make sure that's in the record. So deep into the work session at the last council meeting, Mayor, is when you said your reason for wanting to ban and restrict short-term rentals is so those who want to live here full-time can buy homes. If this is really your reason, I'm not sure why for months we hadn't heard this. There's been a song and dance about short-term rentals causing crime and short-term rentals decreasing quality of life. And now we hear that it's so that people that want to live here can buy houses because they can't. So if that is in fact your reason, I think you also need to in fact enact laws that make people sell their second homes if they don't live here full-time, if they don't short-term rent them. You need to make them sell their homes the way you're trying to make people that rent out their second home as short-term rentals, because then that would free up homes for people that want to live here full-time. And in fact, I think it's better for people to short-term rent their home when they're not using it, their second home, because that contributes more to the local economy here. So, I mean, housing shortage is nothing unique to Pinehurst. It's nationwide. Last week on NBC Nightly News, there was a piece on the housing shortage throughout the country, and they talked about specifically Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and Wichita, Kansas. And I don't think those are high on most people's list of prime places to want to live, but they're having housing shortages too. They went through a multitude of reasons for it, and on that news program, they didn't bring up short-term rentals once as being the reason for housing shortages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the only name on the list. Are there others who wish to make comments, public comments to the village tonight? Yes, ma'am. And Teresa, if you do have a copy of your comments, please. Thank you. Give them to the clerk. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Debbie Layler, 80 Azalea Road, and I am here to say thank you. Yay, I am here to give you a big hand on your proposed plan to take a look at the downtown area and improve its appearance. I'm going to go home and watch your discussion of it tonight online. But Jeff Batten, and I've been talking about this for about 6 years. The prior chairwoman of the beautification committee, I believe is still, or I guess she left, was sitting over there previously. And this is a long time coming. And if it took the USGA to get y'all to focus on it, yay, all for it. And Lydia has been listening to me sing this song for about 10 years. So just a few things as you get to the discussion of the plan tonight. Please consider, when you are looking at the plan, the size of the delivery trucks that the resort is currently using to resupply their restaurants. They're 18-wheelers, and so they're coming into the downtown area, and we'll have to maneuver around the big SUVs and trucks that are traditionally parked on the street. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is the question of the alleys, which are private but are used by the public. And I would notice that on the alley next to the Drum and Quill, the plan only marked off along the commercial section of that road. It stopped when it got to the residential, and that's fine. But on the commercial portion, for many years, the two restaurants that access that alley have their condensation pipes draining onto the alley, and it is revolting. And if you go behind the Drum and Quill these days, Theo's is closed, so it's not a factor anymore, but Drum and Quill, it's nasty, and people walk down that alley. So please consider that as part of your consideration when you're talking about the alleys. I have to congratulate you in the plan on changing the parking on the stretch of Chinkapin from Ritter Road to Magnolia to make that parallel parking. It was extremely dangerous pulling out of Ritter onto that stretch of road with people parked at the diagonal. And it will allow also the replanting of the landscaping along that road. As I'm sure Jeff remembers, there never used to be parking on that section of the roads. So although it would be lovely if the parking went away completely, at least changing it to parallel parking will allow some landscaping to be put back in. But I think it's so exciting. I'm just, yay, I'm so excited. This is a really good thing to be doing, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who wishes to speak to the village council tonight? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move into our work session? That's a motion to adjourn the regular meeting by Councilman Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Hogaman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries, and we'll move into our work session at 6:55. We'll take about a 4-minute break while we reorganize the tables and be on our way.